Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the final session, Inconvenient Necessity, Managing Cyber Risk and Integrated Technology Solutions. So to begin my presentation, let's begin with a story. Let's take a window in what the near future might look like in any one of our daily lives. You get up in the morning. You check your phone because you're excited because you just got an email that your contract automatically executed and your dream home, which is a vacation home, just closed. And the deed automatically transferred on the blockchain that your state now uses for the transfer of real property. And you want to quickly get to the airport, but you've got to get in your car and you've got to take a conference call for work. And you know what? I got to focus on that. So I'm just going to put my car in full autonomous driving mode while we drive over to the port. And so you get there, and did I say port? I meant drone port. Because in order to get to the airport and all that traffic, well, now you can just get on the local drone. And so I get out my phone, which has my unique identity that's on the blockchain, and I swipe it. It lets me through. I get onto a fully autonomous quadcopter that can take me to the airport in what used to be an hour and a half. I can get there in 20 minutes, and I can sit on the copter and read an email, relax, and I watch all of the traffic underneath. And the drone has no carbon footprint because it's all electric. And I want to start with that story because all of that technology is currently been deployed or in development. We talked about drones. We talked about AI, the blockchain. IoT devices are part of that. You might see some form of facial recognition. But if you've been attending this conference for the last 2 days and listening closely to the sessions, you know that there's this other concept out there, and it's called cybersecurity. And all of this benefit comes with this side effect of this inconvenient necessity of we're creating all this data, creating all this benefit. How do we manage the security risk? And so what I thought would be a fun way to kind of sum up our time at this conference together is let's talk about some of these technologies and how they're integrated and how to weigh those benefits with really understanding how do we address cybersecurity risk that we identify that's inherent to these technologies in and of themselves, but especially when you integrate them. And the place that I want to start with everyone today is my favorite, the drone. And guess what? We brought props. Unfortunately, we're not all together. I can't fly it, but this is the state of the art as the drone industry sits today. This is a DJI Mavic Pro 2 drone, fully autonomous. I can fly it. It even knows how to get out of the way of stuff. But what's really interesting is if you look on the front of this drone, you'll see a camera. And I bet you the next time that you're able to go to a wedding, you're going to see the photographer not only taking pictures with his or her camera, but they might want to get a wide shot of everybody. And what are they going to do? They can't get up in the air. They bring in the drone. But interestingly enough, when you take this camera that takes some amazing photos and you add artificial intelligence to it or facial recognition to it, what have we created? This literally becomes a data collection machine. And so how do we think about this from a cybersecurity perspective? So the picture that I have for you there is, this is the City Hall in Peachtree Corners, Georgia. And I've been working on a project out there called the Curiosity Lab, which is a real world testing facility. So think of the ability to test drones, autonomous vehicle. That shuttle you see in that picture is a fully autonomous shuttle that goes around a 3.5 mile autonomous track within a tech park in a real world environment. And what I wanted to talk about today is we test all these different products and technology. So what do you do to build cybersecurity and privacy into the DNA of these different technologies, using this drone and AI as an example? What data is it collecting? Should it collect the data? And we're going to talk about that, because really where cybersecurity comes into play is, as you know, as a society, as a business, it's all about data and how we process it and how we use it. But as part of that data collection, when we're talking about a drone, we're also talking about how do we protect that data. And so I want you to think about a drone with facial recognition technology that they could fly 20,000 feet in the sky for traffic patterns. So it can identify a car, but not only that, your license plate. And the government might say, or the local municipality, that, hey, we just want this. This is how we control traffic flow. But what if they then say, you know what, we're going to collect this data and we're going to sell it to Starbucks, because now that they know Justin goes down a route a certain way every day, hey, we know he passes by a Starbucks. We should market because we know specifically what his route is. But the question becomes, what happens if that data is hacked? Can a threat actor or somebody now know intimate details about my life, how I go to work every day, the patterns of my life and where I go pick up my kids? And how is that data being protected? And a lot of times, and I'm sure you've seen it over the course of the last 2 days and the other sessions, you've seen what are some of the challenges with artificial intelligence? What are some of the challenges with autonomous vehicles, artificial intelligence? And what happens, as you're well aware as security professionals, is privacy and security, that's an afterthought. And look what we've learned with social media. But now what's coming onto the market? Drones are starting to do all kinds of things. You can send them over construction sites. You can have them check infrastructure. They can do a lot of dangerous tasks more efficiently than we can, but they're collecting all of this data. So how do we take some of the great processes you've learned about over the last 2 days with using multi-factor authentication, using network segmentation, but also what kind of data should we allow these drones to collect? If they're going to do an autonomous package delivery, if say UPS or Amazon's going to deliver a package to me, well, should they be keeping their camera on over the whole route and taking digital video of where they're going? How would you feel if one of these drones were to sit outside of your house on a public street and be taking video while you're in your backyard with your kids? You'd probably think that's a gross invasion of my privacy. But take it one step further. The fact that someone could collect that data, be it that or data that is being collected by a municipal drone for traffic patterns, how is that data being protected? Because if you're going to create the data, you've got to find a way to protect it. And as we've seen, particularly in the public sector, with SolarWinds just being the latest example, anything that we can create and any data that we can try to protect, there are people who are out there dedicated to try to get unauthorized access to that data. And you're saying, well, Justin, I'm at this conference. Of course I realize that that's the case. And my response is going to be, if that is the case, why is ransomware a $1 trillion industry? Why do, when I handle ransomware cases, repetitively see companies who have no incident response plan, whose response to a data breach is basically to just do the best they can without any kind of plan? And yet, that's the state of affairs today in large part. And we're now going to introduce technology such as this drone. I had a webinar today about deepfake. So all of these technologies that will accelerate the divide between our ability to comprehend how they impact us versus the business impulse to monetize them and the data that they create, that gap only gets wider. So I want to talk a little bit about another part of my story about what the near future may look like, and that's artificial intelligence and cyber risk. And of course, in my view, the best example of artificial intelligence and cyber risk that there is of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Governator, the Terminator. And we all remember Terminator, the movie that made Arnold a cultural icon. But do you remember Skynet? And in the movie, if you recall, Skynet was this artificial intelligence that the government had created to basically use our military and keep track of our military arsenal. And so they flip the switch, it goes on, and it starts learning at a rate no one ever anticipated. And before they can, flip the kill switch, the artificial intelligence says, hey, these military people are trying to shut me down. They're a threat. How am I going to deal with that threat? Oh, I'll launch the nuclear weapons and other weapons in the arsenal of the military that I have control over. And that starts Armageddon. And, when the movie came out, do any of you remember what year that movie came out? I know we're doing this virtually, so it's 1984. I remember watching that movie and thinking, wow, this sounds like pure science fiction. But here we are in 2021, and I would suggest to you that that's terrifyingly realistic, because you remember in the movie that there were those crafts that flew by themselves in the movie. That's what this is. And then, Arnold obviously was a very advanced robot. But the question we have here is, how do we start to use artificial intelligence and really appreciate the security implications of artificial intelligence? You've probably read a lot about how it can have bias. Artificial intelligence, all it is at the end of the day is machine learning or an algorithm that is able to implement steps that are programmed into it on how to evaluate large amounts of data. So if the data that it gets is flawed, or the programming of how the algorithm is flawed, you can get what you might think are, of course, flawed answers. Consider a test case where you're looking at mountains and mountains of data about applicants for a job. And maybe those applicants are only mostly a certain gender, a certain race, a certain age. The algorithm doesn't know any better. It just executes its programming and spits out an answer. How does it know, like in the Terminator, a human was, wait a second, why would I launch all of these weapons at once? That doesn't make sense. A machine just acts according to its programming. So the question becomes, when we're talking about AI, how do we start to, as security professionals, be able to work with the business people? And that means getting a seat at the table to talk about, hey, have you thought about how this artificial intelligence might be able to be hacked? Or more concerning, how could artificial intelligence be used by, say, a threat actor to even engage in a ransomware or other kind of cyber attack more quickly? Because the AI helps the threat actor figure out how more optimally to run the cyber attack. And what I'm seeing in my overall experience, when I step out of the venue like we have today, where we're talking to security professionals, and I step out and I talk to business people, what I invariably learn is the stuff that we think about as security professionals, like multi-factor authentication and network segmentation. That's not what the business people are necessarily thinking about. They're thinking, hey, how do I market this drone? How do I collect this data? How do I monetize this in a way that's beneficial to the company? And it's amazing to me how often this happens. It's really a common day occurrence. And so how do we as security professionals think about, in the example I gave with the autonomous vehicle? Let's say the vehicle, how is it programmed? If it hits a pebble in the road or a boulder, does it veer off to the right and maybe it only hurts the people in the car? Does it veer left where it may not hurt the people in the car, but it could smash into another car? What is the right answer to that? How are companies thinking about those types of issues as they develop the technology? Where are these difficult questions being asked from a security standpoint? How are we having it so that the security folks can get a seat at the table? So one of the other things that I talked about was facial recognition. I gave the example of the drone that was flying high above the city and had facial recognition technology in the camera. It can start recognizing not only faces, but license plates. All you have to do is put a couple of these artifacts together and you have some very specific information about all of us that can be used for marketing purposes, or it could be used for tracing protesters who may go to a Black Lives Matter rally. So then how do we weigh the opportunity for facial recognition versus some of the cybersecurity issues that are presented? Because once you start creating data, particularly data that in and of itself or easily combined with other data can lead to personally identifiable information, now we have to figure out a way to protect that information from unauthorized access. So when you are, as a security professional, looking at the design or implementation of facial recognition or other kinds of software, what data is being collected? Does the user provide consent? How is the individual informed? How is the data used? Now, while these are clearly privacy questions, this is where privacy and security really intersect. Because if you don't understand what data is being created and classify that data, then how do you know what level of protection is required for the data as well as the system that is producing the data? And that's where the early process of, hey, we're going to fly this drone over the city with facial recognition software, we say, okay, what kind of data are we collecting? How do we classify it? And then we start to figure out, okay, if that's the level of sensitivity of the data, either from our corporate culture or probably more importantly under a GDPR, a CCPA, other laws and regulations, how do we start to put the proper cybersecurity in place? By that, I mean administrative policies and procedures. But when the rubber hits the road, it's really what are the technical processes that are being put in place to protect the information. And then there's the baseline question of what data should be collected, because a lot of business people don't think, hey, if I'm collecting all this information from a drone, what am I doing to protect it? It's an afterthought until, of course, you get ransomware. And as you've learned from other sessions throughout the last 2 days, once a company gets ransomware, they are reborn in how important they think security is. So another topic that I want to touch on that is a personal favorite of mine, if you recall in my example, part of our new future will entail some use of the blockchain beyond its most common use, which is cryptocurrency. And I want to touch on it because I want you to see how technology can evolve to make you want to question certain underlying initial assumptions about it. Wow, Justin, it's getting late in the day. What exactly do you mean by that? Here's what I mean. Blockchain technology. First things first. Blockchain and Bitcoin are not the same thing. Blockchain is what I call a digital ledger that records transactions that is readily available to lots of people at the same time in different places. Bitcoin is the most mature use of the blockchain. So when we think about blockchain in a use case such as I alluded to with the real estate deeds, or what I'm going to discuss here with crypto, is what you have to understand about this technology is it's designed to transform the role of the middleman. Justin, what do you mean by that? Well, in a typical transaction, if I owe somebody $100 for lunch, I have a bank account, they have a bank account, like in the example here where Harry and Sally need to transact money. Well, who verifies their account? Who verifies the authenticity of who they are? It's, of course, the banker. And as we all know, the banker doesn't work for free. They charge fees. I have to wire money this week, and they're going to charge me $40 for a wire. Yay! We're all really unexcited about that. So what is transformational about blockchain, in particular the Bitcoin? Well, in a Bitcoin world, what's really revolutionary is when Harry wants to transfer the Bitcoin to Sally, guess what? there's no bank, there's no government. The way that you verify a transaction is through the Bitcoin miner. What is Bitcoin miner? Well, it's basically, Bitcoin is a software program that, in a way or shape or form, set up an entire incentive system to get people all around the world to contribute computing power to the blockchain to, in essence, act as the middleman who verifies the accuracy of the transaction. They essentially have to solve a complex math algorithm that is created by the Bitcoin software. And when the miners have reached a consensus, like a majority of them, that yes, they've solved that algorithm, that's how they verify the Bitcoin from Harry to Sally. So the question becomes, wow, that decentralized system, that sounds like that's pretty safe. Well, here's the thing. We all recall in 2017 when Bitcoin got up to $20,000. Right now it's up to, I think, 55 as we talk today. What happened when it really shot up in price? Everyone's like, wow, I want to become a Bitcoin miner because the reward for mining or verifying transactions is what? The Bitcoin. So what happens? If I had 5 miners before and more people flood in, my chances of mining and getting the reward of a Bitcoin go down. But if I were to then have a partnership with all of the people listening to my presentation today, and we created a pool, together we might have a better chance of getting a reward than any one of us might individually. But what's interesting about that is the whole point of a blockchain is to decentralize it. But when the reward of Bitcoin became so high that you had all these Bitcoin miners flooding into the industry, and you start to create mining pools, you've taken a verification process that was decentralized and done what? You centralized it. And the reason that I'm bringing this up to you is one of the core tenets of blockchain technology is it's more secure because it's decentralized. No one person or one centralized place is the keeper of the information. It's encrypted and everyone can gain access to it as long as you protect your private key. One interesting thing I learned is I represent a company that has one of the largest crypto mining facilities in the country. And they were so proud, I've got my Bitcoin locked down, no problem at all. And I said, well, you're in a mining pool, right? Oh yeah, I'm in pool number 10. I was like, well, how do you password protect or otherwise secure the mining pool so that your miners can't be easily hacked and moved to, say, mine for me instead of you? And there was a pregnant pause. And my point to you, which is a theme of this presentation, is when you start talking to the business people about all of these technologies, they focus on the promise, the benefit. Yeah, I'm getting the Bitcoin. And they don't think about how if we start to be in these mining pools, I'm starting to centralize the process. And oh, if I only have a password, a simple password protection for gaining access to my miners, well, all the hacker or threat actor has to do is, why go after your wallet where you store the Bitcoin? Just go after the machines that are responsible for mining the coin. And that's where your place of vulnerability is. And my whole point of bringing this up to you is, again, as a security professional, part of our job is to take a look at this blockchain that could get created for real estate deeds and say, okay, where are some of the potential security issues, not from what you're telling me today, but how it could evolve over the future? Meaning, when Bitcoin first came out, it really truly was decentralized in the way that miners verified transactions. But over time, you've got a couple big mining pools. So if someone could hack the 2 largest mining pools, you'd probably have 51% of all of the miners who do the verification on a blockchain, which means you could potentially control the whole thing. The point being, you have to continue as a security professional to start to question assumptions where business people, as things evolve, they're really focused on, how do I move with the market? How do I stay ahead of it? How do I make a profit? Not thinking about some of these other things in the background that could cause the crypto jacker to come one day and take all the Bitcoin, and all that profit they worked on over the last 2 years in the matter of days or weeks or months has evaporated. Quickly, Internet of Things. We're all familiar with that. Everyone, I'm sure, listening to this today is you're on your computer and you've got maybe your air conditioner is a smart device. You've got apps on your phones. We've all talked about this. Well, one of the interesting things when you talk about a blockchain is, and you're going to have smart contracts, how do I get the information that verifies that a condition occurred or it didn't occur to say, hey, the real estate transaction is closed. Hey, smart contract, automatically execute and tell the blockchain where my deed is to transfer the deed. A lot of people think you use Internet of Things, IoT devices. And of course, talking to this audience, the first thing you're going to say, well, gee, Justin, that has about the least amount of security that I can think of. Yet, a lot of business people want to rely on these types of devices to get critical information to determine if the survey has been done so that, yes, we can check the box. Smart contract, execute, sell that property to Justin, pay the purchase price. And I want you to see this because we talked about where the issues might be in the blockchain where you could have a common point of failure. But yet from a security perspective, here is another area when you're creating this blockchain with real estate records that you could have a potential issue. And that's with the IoT devices that are transmitting the information that will either cause the smart contract to close the deal or not close the deal. So think of what a threat actor could do if they knew about some impending transaction for $100 million. Maybe they're able to get into the IoT devices and stop the transaction or find a way to divert the payment of funds from the seller to their account. So again, how are we evaluating as security professionals, getting a seat at the table and explaining to the business people when I'm looking at a blockchain, a drone, AI, IoT devices, when you integrate all of these together, all of the problems or challenges, I should say, from a security perspective are multiplied because now they're all integrated together and any one of them could be a common point of failure that takes the system down so that it's not accessible. It could be encrypted in ransomware, and then all the other kinds of things that you heard about from the other presentations today can occur. So I thought what we would do in closing is just have a few final thoughts. And my biggest thought is technology is transforming our world. And I think my example of what the future could look like with drones and facial recognition and your identity being on your phone, all that is in the works. You've either read about it or you may be working on it. But how do we balance all of that with the need for privacy and security? Because the challenge with privacy and security is it's inconvenient. And as a society, when it comes to technology, be it in our personal lives and our business lives, we worship the convenience, efficient process. I mean, it's amazing the sheer logistical brilliance of this country on how we've been able to roll out a vaccination. But at the same time, look at the opportunities for a threat actor. If I'm watching all this new technology, deep fake is coming and other aspects of drones, it is really important that as you leave this conference, you think about how does security get a seat at the table? How can we get the business people who are not security focused to be thinking about privacy and security on the front end? Because as you've learned today with other presentations, the significance of the risk from a ransomware attack, a data breach, not only your financial litigation costs, but the reputational harm to your company and just the lack of trust. It's way off the charts. But the question is, what can we do as security professionals to each evangelize so that the business people start to bring us in, seek our advice at the time they're designing and implementing this, not as the afterthought. With that, I want to thank you so much for your time today. You can also find me on a podcast that I do with my wife. She said privacy, he said security. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.